The first thunderhead rose like a bruise over the prairie sky when he coasted the Mercedes into the ghosted rest stop and let the engine idle. I had already hit record. The little red dot pulsed on my screen once, twice. Like a heartbeat, I refused to surrender. He didn't look at me. He never did when he wanted to hurt, without owning it. Out, Andrew said, fingers drumming the wheel in that metronome of dominance. You need a lesson, Amanda. The air smelled like wet dust about to wake up. Cracked asphalt cross-hatched the empty lot. Weeds pushed through the seams like small rebellions. A boarded-up convenience store hunched at the far edge, windows X'd with plywood and rain-stained flyers for events no one would ever attend. A storm line grumbled somewhere west. 37 miles from home. He checked a map, chosen a place where the distance would be humiliating and the silence expansive. My mother used to say, softly in Vietnamese, "Lat mem buok chat." Soft strings can bind the tightest. It wasn't permission to be meek. It was a strategy disguised as calm. I kept my breathing even and rolled the lesson between my teeth until it tasted like iron and resolve. He still wouldn't cut the ignition. You went behind my back, he added, voice smooth enough to sell someone else's future. Called my accountant. Sniffed around like a paranoid child. Actions have consequences. Walk home. Think about your place. Leather sighed as I shifted to face him. His profile could have been coin-stamped, jaw carved by ambition, the glitter of a man who had made an altar of other people's savings. In restaurants, he wore this same expression at the climax of a ruthless story, the part where someone loses their job and he orders dessert. 37 miles, I repeated, as if tasting a vintage. I watched the red dot continue its quiet work. 8 months of gathering, 8 months of listening more than speaking, of cataloging the paperwork he called trivial and the transfers he called temporary. 8 months of smiling when the script required it, and hiding a second phone where a man who believed he orchestrated everything would never think to look. He gave a laugh that was more exhale than joy. It would be shorter if you were less stubborn. I glanced out at the sky. The light had thinned into pewter. Heat broke on my skin as the wind turned inward. It's going to storm, then start walking before it hits. He finally flicked his gaze toward me, searching for tears, an apology, a fold. Unless you want to admit you were wrong. I could have told him about the pearl earring I found kicked under our bed 2 days ago, mismatched to anything I own. I could have described the $10,000 that vanished with a notation clever only to the person who wrote it. But my mother also taught me about Thu Tu, order. When you must pull a knot, do it in sequence. Tug the right thread at the right time. Don't hurry and break the line. I'll walk, I said. I pushed the door open. Warm wind dragged the smell of creosote and old gasoline into the car for one last sour breath. My heels clicked once on the asphalt. He waited that extra beat, as if granting mercy to the performance he had written, then pressed the accelerator. Tires whispered. Red taillights slid into the curve like wounded eyes. He was already turning to his phone. He couldn't help himself. Somewhere in that glowing rectangle, I imagined a text to a woman who believed she was cherished and exceptional. He would tell her a story about taming chaos. He would pour a drink. He would congratulate himself. I counted to 60 with the patience of a person who has memorized every hairline crack in the mask of a cruel man. 60, and the road swallowed him. Then I turned, skirt brushing my calves, and walked toward the drowned silhouette of the boarded store. Marcus's truck slept in the lee of the building, dark paint absorbing the early drops, grill half hidden by a curtain of weeds. One click on my second phone, twice, pause, twice. Our signal. The driver's door opened with a soft creak that sounded like gratitude. Umbrella, Marcus said, already stepping out. He was broader than me by a lifetime of carrying other people's burdens, shoulders filling the frame of the rain-black jacket. He'd also been the one to screw the tiny camera into the soffit above our pantry, and shrug when Andrew called it an overkill security upgrade. Coffee. He pressed the thermos into my hands. Metal burned my palms pleasantly. The first fat raindrops hit the concrete and exploded like held breath. Got everything? He asked. I let the recording stop and felt the phone settle in my pocket like a captured animal. Every word. He did the line. Know your place. Marcus shook his head, jaw tightening for both of us. 3 years of watching him inventory your soul and call it love, and that's the line he chooses. His gaze flicked past me toward the nowhere road. This is criminal abandonment, you know. He picked this spot on purpose. He mentioned it last week, I said. The scene replayed, his casual performative curiosity. Imagine being stranded here, the kind of line he'd deliver like a romantic joke, just to make my laugh an alibi later. That's when I knew he was ready to escalate. We moved together with the muscle memory of rehearsal. Marcus popped the truck's back door. I tucked my hair under the umbrella, felt the jade pendant at my throat, a small oval my mother pressed into my palm the day my last certainty broke. For luck, she said in Vietnamese, but also for spine. Valentina? I asked as we slid into the cab. Rain thickened, the windshield becoming a field of static that the wipers cut and cut again, watching the accounts. She saw the 10 grand move this afternoon. Bookmarked it, chained the screenshots, built the timeline. She says the bleed goes back 2 years. He paused, then softened his voice. Not your fault. Fault is a word he keeps like a leash, I said. I'm done wearing it. Marcus checked the dash. A green dot winked on his encrypted app. House cams uploaded. Yesterday's sequence. Kitchen, then study. If the timestamps hold, we have him copying documents at 2 a.m. again. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, and tasted rain. Rebecca, emergency filing at 9 a.m. Abandonment plus financial abuse plus fraud. She has the petition ready to go the moment we timestamp tonight. She also called her contact at the SEC. They've been sniffing around his numbers. They just needed someone to pour light. Across the lot, the empty highway exhaled a slow truck somewhere unseen. I pictured Andrew in the warm cone of our kitchen's pendant light, telling himself stories about genius and necessity while he slipped money from one account to another, like a card trick performed for a mirror. He believed his reflection. That was the weakness. Cruel men mistake their echo for truth. We'll go the back roads, Marcus said, easing us out from behind the boarded store. The tires rolled over gravel soft with the storm's first spit. Don't want him catching a glimpse and rewriting your miracle into a lie. He'll pour a drink and call me twice. Then his mother. I could script it because he had taught me the beats. He'll threaten concern. Then he'll threaten punishment. Then he'll sleep like a man who believes morning owes him obedience. I uncapped the thermos and let coffee steam my face. The heat steadied my hands. Mothers teach you the tenderness you need. Brothers teach you how to carry weight. Lawyers teach you where to put it down so the law can feel it. Hotel's ready, Marcus said. Checked in under your maiden name. Cash. Front desk clerk will file an incident report. Security cameras will catch you coming in soaked and shaking. You'll be polite enough for the humanity of it, clear enough for the paper trail. I set the thermos between my knees and picked up my phone. The screen showed the paused waveform of Andrew's voice, each spike a small mountain of conviction. I scrubbed back and pressed play for 1 second, just long enough to hear him say, "It's my money. I manage it." Let him keep thinking that, I said, shutting it down and sliding it into the pocket stitched for this purpose. Tonight he gave me what I needed most. What's that? Marcus asked. His own script, in his own voice, in a place he thought belonged to silence. The rain arrived fully now, 1,000 fingers drumming the roof, draping the world in curtains. The truck's cabin felt like a chapel in motion, a steel room where vows could be remade without witnesses. I curled my fingers around the jade and remembered another of my mother's proverbs, Nuok che jamon, water wears down stone. Patience is not passivity, it is erosion with an agenda. We merged onto the county road, taillights a faint ember in our wake. Somewhere behind us, the empty rest stop resumed its quiet decay. Somewhere ahead, a clerk would hand me towels with kind eyes and write down my words in ink that would outlast the storm. Somewhere in between, a man would open a bottle, check a balance, and believe in the continued sovereignty of himself. "He thinks I'm walking home," I said, watching the rain stitch the world into a single moving veil. "He has no idea I've already arrived at the end of his road." Marcus drove like someone who'd memorized every contour of these back roads, headlights cutting ribbons through the rain. The truck smelled of damp wool and thermos steam, a kind of anchor against the storm's fury. My pulse was steady, steadier than I expected, but maybe that was because every move had been rehearsed down to the smallest breath. 8 months of preparation weren't just about gathering evidence. They were about teaching myself how to sit still inside a hurricane and not flinch. "Let's walk through it again," Marcus said. His voice was low, more checklist than conversation. Step 1, record his words. Step 2, incident report at the hotel. Step 3, Valentina ties the financial bleed to tonight's abandonment. Step 4, Rebecca files at 9 sharp. I sipped the coffee, bitter but grounding. And step 5? Step 5 is when he realizes the leash snapped months ago, and you're the one holding it now. We shared a glance, and in it lived 3 years of quiet anger. His as my brother, mine as a wife. Valentina pinged the secure chat at 9:47 p.m. Sharp, transfer traced, screen capped. Cayman accounts logged, bleed documented. Her precision was a comfort. A forensic accountant by trade, she understood better than most how financial abuse wasn't just about money. It was about making someone doubt their own footing. She once told me abusers didn't drain accounts because they needed cash. They did it to make sure you never felt safe enough to leave. Marcus read her update aloud, rain drumming a backbeat on the roof. "She's got the screenshots chained to blockchain for authenticity. No wiggle room." I nodded, fingers whirring the small jade pendant at my throat. My mother had pressed it into my hand at my wedding day, whispering, "Soft things can bind." At the time, I thought she meant compromise. Tonight I understood she meant patience sharpened into steel. "Rebecca's already awake," Marcus continued. "She drafted the petition for emergency injunction. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. She'll be in the courthouse lobby when they open. Rebecca, my ruthless compass. Divorce attorney, veteran of battles where men like Andrew strutted into hearings, certain they'd charm a judge into overlooking cruelty dressed as discipline. She once told me that abandonment during a storm wasn't just a betrayal, it was an exhibit. Judges didn't forgive men who left their wives to drown in weather or in silence. I pulled out my phone and checked the gallery. Hundreds of files lived there. Voice memos, screen recordings, photographs of documents taken in stolen minutes while Andrew showered or snored beside me. One folder bore a title Marcus had given it, Storm Archive. Tonight's clip slid neatly inside, the final keystone. "Every word," I whispered, half to myself. Every bruise he never put on skin but carved into memory, now in his own voice. Marcus shifted lanes around a fallen branch. "Do you want me to back up the file now, or wait until we hit the hotel Wi-Fi?" "Now," I said. "Redundancy is safety." He tapped his encrypted app. A green bar crawled across the screen, uploading to 3 separate cloud vaults under aliases Andrew never knew existed. The truck's dashboard light flickered against the storm, painting Marcus's profile in flashes. I studied my brother's clenched jaw, remembering the night he'd confronted Andrew after a family dinner. Andrew had smiled, poured him a drink, and made some quip about managing women. Marcus hadn't struck him, though I knew he wanted to. He'd simply left, silent, and later told me, "When you're ready, I'll be there." That was 8 months ago. He had been there every step since. "Do you remember the signal?" Marcus asked. "Red umbrella, held at chest level. And the decoy phrase? I smiled faintly. I'll ask the clerk if they have jasmine tea. If I say that, you know something's wrong. Good, small details save big lives. The storm eased as the city's glow began to smear across the horizon. We were close. My heart clenched, not from fear but from clarity. This was no longer about surviving Andrew's lesson. It was about rewriting it. He believed cruelty taught respect. I would show him cruelty taught records, witnesses, and judges. I thought again of my mother's proverb, Lat mem buak chat. Andrew mistook softness for surrender. What he never realized was that silk can strangle just as effectively as rope if you know how to tie it. The hotel loomed ahead, a pale box with glowing windows. I tucked the pendant back under my blouse and straightened my shoulders. This was the next stage of the performance. Remember, Marcus said as he slowed the truck, this is the part where you look like prey. Tomorrow, you'll show them you've been the hunter all along. I pressed the thermos lid closed, the warmth still tingling my palms. He thinks he ended the night with control, I murmured. He doesn't know we've already built his ending. Marcus parked beneath the awning. Rain hissed around us, soft and relentless. Ready? He asked. I opened the door, felt the storm's breath on my face, and nodded. Let's make sure the world hears his lesson for what it really is. The hotel lobby glowed like a lantern, golden light spilling through glass doors into the storm's mouth. I stepped inside with water dripping from my hair, my shoes squeaking against polished tiles. My fingers trembled just enough to make the clerk believe the story we'd rehearsed. In reality, the tremor was rehearsed too. Good evening. Oh my goodness. Are you all right? The night clerk gasped, rushing around the counter with a stack of towels. Her kindness was unscripted, and that almost broke me more than Andrew's cruelty. My husband. I let my voice falter, catching it like a snagged hem. He left me at a rest stop, 30 miles from here, in the storm. The towel wrapped around my shoulders carried the faint scent of detergent and something floral. I imagined the incident report already forming in her head. Traumatized woman, abandoned, soaked through. Exactly what Rebecca had advised, an independent witness creating a written account before Andrew could spin his narrative. Please sit, the clerk said, guiding me toward a chair near the front desk. Her pen scratched furiously across a form while I shivered, exaggerating only slightly. I handed her my ID, the one under my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and slid the emergency credit card across the counter. Andrew didn't know it existed. Marcus had helped me open it months ago with a bank he couldn't touch. The transaction beeped. Digital proof I was here, alone, registering without him. Upstairs, the hallway hummed with quiet. Room 412 opened with a muted click. Inside, beige walls, standard issue art, a view of city lights blurred by rain. It wasn't home, but it was sanctuary. I bolted the lock, dropped the chain, and let myself exhale fully for the first time that night. I peeled off damp clothes, replacing them with dry sweats I'd stashed here the day before. Every detail mattered, Rebecca had reminded me. If Andrew tried to claim I staged anything, the timestamps on my room entry, the clerk's testimony, and the CCTV would tell the truth. My phone buzzed. A voicemail, then another. His number. I pressed play, recording the playback on the second phone Marcus had set up. Andrew's voice filled the sterile room. Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. Lessons been learned. Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse. Another message followed minutes later, sharper. I know you have your phone. Stop being childish. If you're trying to scare me, it won't work. Find your own way home. He was irritated but not worried yet. He thought I'd fold, as always, just before dawn. He didn't know silence was the most powerful weapon I had left. I sat at the small desk and opened my notebook, the one I used only for myself, never for court. Tonight wasn't just about evidence. It was about remembering who I was beneath the version Andrew had rewritten. I wrote. I managed a $30 million portfolio before him. I wrote, He told me I misremembered conversations, but I wrote them down and knew I was right. I wrote, "I am not losing my mind. He is losing his mask." The rain tapped harder against the window. I imagined it was an army outside, knocking to remind me I wasn't alone. Near midnight, the phone buzzed again. This time, a number I didn't recognize. I answered but said nothing. Amanda. A woman's voice, hesitant. Nain. Andrew asked me to call you. He's worried. He says he's sorry, that you should come home. Andrew never apologized. Not once in 3 years. That he sent his mistress to deliver false regret told me exactly how off balance he was. I ended the call without a word, logging the number, the time, the silence. At 12:30, the clerk knocked softly, delivering hot tea. "You poor thing," she whispered. "I added it to your check-in notes. Sometimes it helps if there's a record." Perfect. Another line in the chain of custody. I sat by the window with the tea, watching lightning shred the sky. He thought I was a pawn stranded in the storm. But pawns, I'd learned, could become queens if they made it to the other side of the board. I replayed the recording from the Mercedes one more time, Andrew's cold words cutting through the thunder. "Walking home might teach you some respect." I whispered back to the empty room. "Respect is earned in courtrooms, Andrew. And tomorrow, the world will hear exactly what you think it means." The phone would not stop buzzing. By 1 a.m., Andrew had called 17 times. Each voicemail stacked neatly into my evidence folder, like bricks in the wall of his undoing. The first few were sharp with authority, the kind of tone he used in boardrooms to silence subordinates. By midnight, they turned panicked, his rhythm breaking as though silence itself was a betrayal. "Amanda, answer me. Don't be dramatic." "Amanda, this is childish. Pick up the phone." "Fine. Stay there. See if I care." Every message was saved. Every timestamp was documented. My silence had become the trap he'd built with his own voice. At 1:15, the calls multiplied. His mother, Margaret, left messages dripping with contempt. "You've embarrassed him enough. Come home before you ruin the family's reputation." Nain called again, her voice thinner this time. "He's upset. He told me to say he'll fix it if you just come back. Please, Amanda." I almost laughed. Andrew outsourcing contrition to his mistress was more than proof of betrayal. It was proof of incompetence. He could not even perform remorse without delegation. I ordered room service, soup, salad, and a glass of wine. The receipt would show I was calm enough to eat, coherent enough to charge the meal at 2 a.m. Survivors are often portrayed as hysterical. I would show the court what composure looked like. When the knock came, I made sure the delivery staff saw me disheveled, wrapped in hotel towels. "Rough night?" he asked sympathetically. I nodded, offering no details. He left, and I tucked the receipt into my notebook like a badge. At 2:30, my neighbor Mrs. Chin texted, "Saw Andrew in your driveway with a flashlight. He was looking under your car. Then he left fast. Everything okay?" He was searching for my vehicle, not realizing Marcus had moved it to a long-term garage across town 2 days earlier. He wanted evidence of my collapse. What he found was absence. I forwarded the text to Rebecca with a note. "Exhibit B." Her reply came instantly. "Perfect. The more frantic he looks, the more deliberate you appear." The storm outside turned violent, sheets of rain battering the windows as if trying to break in. Inside, I felt strangely calm. Every drop seemed to drum the same truth. His story was unraveling. At 3 a.m., Margaret called again. This time, her voice trembled. "You're destroying him, Amanda. Do you want your marriage to end like this?" I didn't answer, but I scribbled her words into my notebook. Judges don't just read documents, they feel patterns. A mother protecting her son's cruelty would only amplify the portrait we were painting. By 4 a.m., the silence flipped. The calls slowed. The voicemails grew shorter. Andrew was running out of script. Without my submission, he had nothing to perform against. I looked at the storm through the glass and whispered, "You thought I'd break in the rain. But storms don't destroy stone. They reveal the cracks already there. At dawn, a text from Rebecca lit my phone like lightning. Judge Coleman granted the emergency hearing. 1 p.m. today. Be ready. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This was the moment we'd been building toward. The night had given us what we needed: proof of abandonment, proof of panic, proof of his unraveling. I opened the folder labeled Storm Archive and watched the files line up neatly in order. 8:47 p.m. recording, Andrew forcing me out of the car. 10:30 p.m. voicemail. Lessons been learned. 12:15 a.m. call log, Nain begging. 2:30 a.m. text, Mrs. Chin's flashlight sighting. 3 a.m. voicemail, Margaret's plea. A perfect sequence, a perfect storm. The rain softened around sunrise. I closed my eyes for a brief hour of rest. Tomorrow, he would sit across from me in court, flanked by lawyers, still believing charm and money could erase cruelty. He had no idea the storm he thought he created was already documented, time-stamped, and waiting to be heard. By the time the sun pried its way through the hotel curtains, I was already awake, sitting at the small desk with a half-empty cup of coffee and a stack of documents spread before me. Sleep had been shallow, more of a rehearsal than a rest. My mind replaying every detail of the plan, every line Andrew had spoken, every frantic voicemail he left in the night. At 8 a.m. sharp, Marcus arrived with a box of evidence drives and a grim determination that matched the weathered look on his face. Behind him, Valentina wheeled in 2 heavy suitcases, her laptop bag slung across her shoulder. Even after working through the night, her eyeliner was sharp, her focus sharper. "The Cayman accounts are frozen," she announced without preamble, flipping open her laptop and pulling up a spreadsheet alive with color-coded cells. He tried to log in at dawn. 3 failed attempts. We've got screenshots of every wire transfer he initiated for the last 18 months. The bleed isn't 10,000. It's millions. Marcus set down his box with a thud. Every hard drive is duplicated. Chain of custody intact. Password protected. Encrypted. No way, he argues, tampering. I felt the room tighten around me, the way air does just before a storm breaks. Rebecca arrived last. Tailored suit, hair slick from the drizzle outside, phone still pressed to her ear. She ended the call with a clipped, "Yes, Your Honor. We'll be ready." "He's retained Blackwood," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. "The shark himself. Expensive. Which means Andrew liquidated something significant overnight. He thinks money will buy him time." "Will it?" I asked. Rebecca's smile was cold, the kind of expression that could freeze a courtroom. "Not today. We've had 8 months. He's had 8 hours. The judge knows the difference." She flipped open her files, laying out the morning's agenda like a general briefing before battle. 9 a.m. File emergency injunction, abandonment, fraud, financial abuse. 11 a.m. Serve discovery request for offshore accounts. 1 p.m. Emergency hearing before Judge Coleman. "Coleman is no nonsense," Rebecca added. "She doesn't like games. If we show her a clear timeline, abandonment last night, fraudulent transfers yesterday afternoon, evidence lined up, Andrew won't get a continuance. We'll freeze everything before he can move another cent." Valentina turned her laptop so we could all see. A graph sprawled across the screen, jagged lines mapping withdrawals against deposits. "This is the pattern of financial abuse," she explained. "First small amounts, plausible deniability, then larger, riskier moves as he grew confident. He wasn't just stealing from clients. He was transferring marital assets into accounts only he could access. Classic coercive control. He wanted you too broke to leave." Her fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling up a folder of screenshots. Wire transfers, emails, offshore shell companies with names as hollow as their purpose. Every transaction is time-stamped, IP traced. We can place his laptop in his office during every major transfer. No wiggle room. Marcus opened his box and pulled out the surveillance highlights. "Fair warning," he said. "This one burns." The first clip played on the hotel TV. Andrew in his study at 2:07 a.m., hunched over the safe, photographing documents with the cold patience of a man stealing from his own wife. Next, him whispering into his phone in the garage, pacing like a predator, mentioning names I'd never heard but amounts I understood. And then, the living room clip. Nyan in my robe, laughing. Andrew leaning back on the couch, smugness dripping from his every word. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. A few more months, and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can stop this charade. My chest tightened, but not from heartbreak. That had died months ago. What I felt now was resolve. Sharp and crystalline. Rebecca studied my face. We don't have to play this one in court unless you want to. The financials alone are enough. No, I said, play it. Let them see him as he really is. Rebecca nodded, jotting a note. We'll begin with the abandonment. Judges hate cruelty disguised as discipline. Then the financial bleed. Clear, documented fraud. Then, if necessary, the affair. By the time Blackwood stands, he'll have nothing left to argue but theatrics. At 10:15, Valentina's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes flashing. Update. SEC liaison confirms they're monitoring his hedge fund. An anonymous tip hit their office yesterday morning. They're circling. I caught Rebecca's smirk. We don't need them for today's hearing. But once they step in, Andrew's not just a bad husband. He's a federal case. The weight of it hit me then. Not just personal betrayal, not just abandonment in the rain, but crimes that rippled outward, touching clients, employees, elderly investors who trusted him. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He was erasing anyone weaker than his ambition. Marcus packed up the drives. Time to move. Back roads only. He'll have people watching the main routes. Rebecca snapped her briefcase shut. 1 o'clock sharp. Coleman doesn't wait. I stood, smoothed my navy suit, and caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't broken, wasn't begging. She was composed, ready, deliberate. Andrew thought he'd taught me a lesson about obedience. Today, I would teach him about consequence. The courthouse conference room was small, paneled in dull oak, its fluorescent lights humming like anxious bees. Marcus set up the projector, while Valentina arranged binders by color-coded tabs. Green for marital assets, red for hedge fund fraud, blue for offshore accounts. Rebecca leaned against the table, one heel tapping in steady rhythm. I sat in the corner, notebook in hand, breathing deep. This wasn't just evidence. It was the anatomy of 3 years of slow erasure. Ready? Marcus asked. As I'll ever be, I said, though my hands felt colder than the rain had been the night before. He clicked play. The first clip was merciless. Andrew, in our study at 2:07 a.m., illuminated by the sterile glow of his desk lamp. His movements were precise, deliberate. Opening the safe, photographing documents, returning them exactly as he found them. On screen, the timestamp glowed like a wound. Valentina's voice cut through the silence. He created duplicates with subtle changes. These forgeries would have replaced the originals over time, granting him full control of your inheritance, Amanda. Rebecca muttered, Judges hate this. Pattern of intent, not mistake. Next clip, the living room. 2 months ago. Nyan in my silk honeymoon robe, glass of wine in hand. Andrew sprawled beside her, laughing. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. A few more months, and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can stop this charade. My stomach twisted, not from betrayal, that scar had calloused over, but from the smug certainty in his tone. Rebecca turned to me. Do you want this in the lineup? It proves infidelity, but the financials are enough on their own. Play it, I said. Let the court see the whole man. Marcus switched to the next folder. Emails projected onto the screen. Subject line sterile but damning. Project Fresh Start. Inside, meticulous instructions from Douglas Stern, his attorney, on how to dismantle me piece by piece, gaslight consistently, hide things, contradict her memories. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight. I felt my jaw clench. I thought of the times Andrew had told me I was misremembering conversations, the missing jewelry that reappeared in bizarre places, the calendar events that mysteriously vanished from my phone. For months, I'd wondered if I was losing my grip. Now, here it was in black and white. Strategy, not accident, Valentina added softly. Stern's already under investigation. This ties him directly to a conspiracy of psychological abuse. Then came the clip Marcus had warned about. Andrew in the garage, pacing between our cars. Jennifer's been perfect. She doesn't even know I'm recording her. Every detail about Amanda's mother's estate, the trust fund, it's worth nearly $2 million, and Amanda doesn't even know it exists. My throat closed. My sister. My blood. Feeding him information about assets I didn't even know about. Rebecca's pen paused mid-scribble. We'll need corroboration, but this is powerful. I whispered, show me the rest. Marcus brought up the financial spreadsheets. Bold red arrows traced $322 million shifted into a personal Panama account. Yesterday afternoon. Hours before he abandoned me at the rest stop, Valentina narrated. He knew the investigation was closing in. The abandonment wasn't just cruelty. It was a distraction. Maybe even preparation to claim you were unstable while he ran. Rebecca leaned back, arms folded. This, combined with last night's recording? Judges don't forgive men who punish wives like this. Add fraud, add offshore hiding, add abandonment. It's a perfect storm. The room was quiet except for the projector fan. I stared at Andrew frozen on screen, mid-gesture, laughing at a joke he'd made about my gullibility. For years I had believed him when he said I was overreacting, paranoid, too sensitive. Now, the evidence was louder than his lies. He's been planning this for a long time, I said. Financial control, isolation, gaslighting, classic abuse. Rebecca nodded slowly. And today, he finds out the storm he tried to unleash is already documented, time-stamped, and weaponized. Marcus closed the laptop. We leave in 30. Back roads, as planned. Hotel cameras have you soaked. Clerk filed the incident report. Calls are logged. You look like prey. Today, you show them you're the hunter. I stood, adjusted my navy suit, and tucked the jade pendant beneath the collar. My mother's words echoed again. Nuok che jamon, water wears down stone. Andrew had mistaken patience for weakness. Today, he'd learn the difference. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nerves. Marble columns rose like sentinels, their cold presence meant to intimidate. I didn't flinch. I walked in flanked by Rebecca on my right, Marcus on my left, Valentina just behind. The navy suit I wore, one Andrew had never seen, was crisp, deliberate. I'd bought it a month ago, imagining this very moment. Andrew was already seated at the defense table. Even in a tailored suit, he looked smaller, the circles under his eyes darkening his arrogance. Beside him, Richard Blackwood leaned in, whispering furiously. The shark lawyer, hired in desperation. Andrew must have sold something overnight to afford him. When his gaze met mine, his jaw tightened. The same clench he used to signal control in boardrooms and restaurants. But here, it looked brittle.
All rise, the bailiff commanded.
Judge Patricia Coleman entered. Black robes, reading glasses perched low. Her reputation preceded her. No patience for theatrics. No tolerance for cruelty dressed as discipline. Court is in session, she declared, settling into her chair. We are here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Harrison Mitchell regarding marital abandonment and financial misconduct. Blackwood stood, his voice smooth. Your Honor, my client was only retained this morning. We request a continuance to properly review the allegations. Denied, Judge Coleman interrupted, her gavel sharp. Your client allegedly abandoned his wife 37 miles from home during a storm. Time is of the essence. Ms. Lawson, proceed. Rebecca rose, every inch the attorney Andrew had underestimated. Your Honor, At approximately 8:47 p.m. last night, Andrew Mitchell ordered my client out of his car at an abandoned rest stop. He told her, quote, "You need a lesson. Walking home might teach you some respect." She pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom, cold and undeniable. "Get out, Amanda. You need a lesson." The sound wave pulsed on the screen. Andrew's face drained of color. Blackwood hissed something in his ear, but Andrew shook his head violently, mouthing, "Out of context." The judge leaned forward. "Did you abandon your wife last night, Mr. Mitchell? Yes or no?" Andrew straightened his tie. "We had an argument. She had her phone. She could have called someone." "Yes or no?" Judge Coleman snapped. "I left her," he admitted. "In a storm, 37 miles from home." The judge's eyebrows rose. Remarkably considerate, Rebecca moved to the next exhibit. "Your Honor, abandonment is only part of a broader pattern. Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets for 18 months. Here are documented transfers totaling over $8 million to offshore accounts." She handed up Valentina's color-coded binders. Screens lit with spreadsheets and bank records. Wire transfers, account numbers, IP traces, all chained and authenticated. Blackwood leapt up. "Objection. These are unsubstantiated allegations." "Let's substantiate them," Rebecca replied coolly. "Exhibit A through F, Cayman Islands accounts, all initiated by Mr. Mitchell without his wife's consent. Exhibit G, a $322 million transfer into a Panama account, yesterday afternoon." The judge's expression hardened with each page she turned. "Mr. Mitchell, these documents are highly persuasive." Andrew's jaw worked furiously, but his silence was louder than his excuses. Rebecca pressed on. "We also have surveillance footage, if the court permits." The judge nodded. The screen flickered. Andrew in the study at 2:07 a.m., photographing documents from our safe. Then worse, Andrew and Nayan in my robe, laughing on our couch. His voice rang out. "She'll never fight it. By the time she realizes, we'll be in Costa Rica." Andrew slammed his hand on the table. "This is a violation of privacy." "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," the judge ordered, gavel cracking. "You invited your mistress into your marital home. Privacy is no shield for betrayal." The courtroom doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped inside, followed by Tom Chin from the SEC. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Andrew twisted in his seat, real fear flickering across his face for the first time. "Your Honor," Tom said, bowing slightly. "Apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement. We'll wait until the hearing concludes." Andrew's eyes darted wildly, first to Blackwood, then to the agents, then to me. Rebecca didn't miss a beat. "Your Honor, in light of abandonment, asset concealment, and fraud, we request an immediate injunction. Freeze all marital assets, award my client exclusive use of the marital home, and order Mr. Mitchell to remain at least 500 feet away." The judge scribbled, then looked up. "Granted. All assets are frozen pending investigation. Mrs. Mitchell is awarded temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell, you will remain 500 feet away from your wife at all times, and you will surrender your passport immediately." Andrew shot to his feet. $10,000 a month. This is insane. She doesn't need— "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," the judge thundered. "You abandoned your wife in a storm and hid millions in assets. I'm being generous, not holding you in contempt right now." He collapsed back into his chair, face blotched with rage. Rebecca gathered her papers with surgical precision. "Your Honor, that concludes our emergency petition." But the day wasn't finished. As the agents shifted near the back, the courtroom doors banged open again. Nayan stumbled in, dress wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes darting until they landed on Andrew. "You said you were divorced," she shouted. "You said she was crazy, that the papers were filed. I have texts, recordings. You promised me everything." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Judge Coleman sighed. "Ma'am, remove yourself." Tom Chin stepped forward. "Actually, Your Honor, We'd very much like to speak with her. Andrew's destruction was no longer hypothetical. It was happening. Live. In front of everyone. The courthouse steps were a hive of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Microphones lunged like bayonets. Reporters smelled blood. Andrew's blood. And they wanted every drop of it on record. Rebecca's hand clamped around my elbow, steering me through the gauntlet. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true your husband stole millions? Amanda, how long have you been planning this? Will you testify against him in federal court?
I kept my gaze forward, Rebecca's command echoing in my head. Dignity is strategy. Silence is power.
Behind me, Andrew was flanked by federal agents, his wrists cuffed, his face ashen under the weight of collapsing lies. Blackwood barked into a phone, his reputation unraveling alongside his clients. Nan trailed behind, mascara streaked, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She'd just detonated Andrew's last defense with her outburst. The golden boy of Minneapolis finance had been reduced to a headline, and I was free to walk past him without lowering my eyes. By late afternoon, the storm had shifted from sky to screen. News anchors dissected the case with relish. Prominent hedge fund manager Andrew Mitchell arrested for embezzlement and spousal abandonment. His mugshot scrolled across every channel, hair disheveled, eyes hollow, the smug sheen stripped away. On Instagram, 9 went nuclear. Screenshots of texts, photos from their trips, even a blurred picture of them in our bed. The caption was long and raw. He told me his wife was unstable. He told me he loved me. I was an idiot. But he's a monster. The comment sections exploded. Clients demanding refunds. Former employees confessing suspicions. Neighbors sharing "we always knew" stories. Rebecca glanced over my shoulder as I scrolled. This is good. Public pressure will keep regulators aggressive. He can't bury this under PR. But Margaret tried. That evening, her lawyer released a statement. Andrew Mitchell is an upstanding man, victimized by a calculating wife seeking financial gain. Rebecca snorted when she read it. Textbook denial. Judges don't care about a mother's blindness. If anything, it makes him look worse. Still, the words stung. Even as he drowned, his family cast me as the villain. At 6 p.m., Marcus slid his laptop across the hotel table. You need to see this. Andrew's company Facebook page had imploded. Clients posted furious demands. Where is our money? How could you betray us? I trusted you with my retirement. One woman wrote, he fired me when I questioned missing funds last year. Now I know why. And then, an email pinged into my inbox. From James Morrison, Andrew's longtime business partner.
Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the fund you don't know. Things that weren't in the federal filing.
Rebecca read it over my shoulder. Set up a meeting. Record everything. If he's flipping, we want his confession too. That night, I sat by the hotel window, watching rain streak the glass. Across the city, Andrew sat in a holding cell, stripped of silk ties and cufflinks, his empire dissolving piece by piece. For years he had taught me silence. Now my silence was louder than any scream.
The hook came not from the storm outside, but from my phone buzzing with yet another unknown number.
When I answered, a shaky voice whispered, Amanda, it's Jennifer. I need to explain. My sister. The one whose name I'd heard in Andrew's garage recording. The one who had betrayed me. Tomorrow, I said coldly. Neutral location, and you come alone.
Morning came pale and brittle. The hotel curtains couldn't keep the light out, nor the weight of the text that had jarred me awake. I have to tell you everything. Please, Amanda. Jennifer.
I stared at my sister's name glowing on the screen. For months, I had suspected shadows in my own house, whispers that didn't match my reality. Now I had heard Andrew's voice confirming it. Jennifer had been his informant. Betrayal, not just from a husband, but from blood. At 10 hours, she arrived at the cafe Rebecca had chosen, a public place with wide windows and a dozen potential witnesses. Neutral ground. Marcus parked nearby, eyes always scanning, a quiet sentinel. Jennifer slid into the booth opposite me, her hands trembling around a manila envelope. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes rimmed red, not with sleeplessness, but with shame.
He knew about the gambling, she whispered, her voice paper thin. 13 months ago. I owed $47,000. I don't even know how he found out, but he offered to pay it all. No strings, he said. Just some questions about Mom, about the family.
She pushed the envelope across the table. Inside were printed emails, every one of their exchanges. I skimmed, bile rising with each line. How's your mother's memory these days? Does Amanda know about the trust? If you could get a copy of the will, I'd be grateful. Jennifer's responses were earnest, almost naive. She thought she was helping a brother-in-law plan for the family's future. You told him about Mom's Alzheimer's diagnosis, I said, voice flat.
She nodded, tears sliding unchecked. She made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want to burden you. But Andrew, he sounded so caring, so determined to get her the best care. I thought,
you thought the man stealing from widows and lying to his wife was the one person you could trust. Her sob cracked open the cafe's low hum. A few heads turned. She covered her face. I was desperate. I didn't know until last week what he really was. I swear, Amanda, I didn't know. By noon, Marcus and I were driving Jennifer to the memory care facility. Mom was lucid that day, her eyes sharper than I'd seen in months. She sat upright, her frail hands folded in her lap as if waiting for us. I knew what he was the first time I met him, she said, her voice carrying weight despite the tremor. The way he looked at our house, not with affection, but with calculation. Your father saw it too. She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a small brass key, cool and heavy in my palm. Safety deposit box, First National Bank on Hennepin. Your father put documents there the week before he died. He said, one day Amanda will need this. Her eyes met mine with fierce clarity. He will try to take everything. Don't let him. That afternoon, Marcus and I walked into the bank's vault. The air cool, metallic, almost reverent. The manager, a man who had known my father, escorted us to the small chamber. Inside the box lay a stack of documents annotated in my father's handwriting. Forged loan applications with my signature. Property transfer papers for my grandmother's lake house. Bank accounts opened in my name but controlled by Andrew. Each paper bore sticky notes. He forged this. She never signed this. It was as though my father had reached from beyond the grave to shield me, to hand me the map of Andrew's deceit. Marcus photographed everything, each click of the camera a nail in Andrew's coffin. Back at the hotel, Rebecca spread the documents across the dining table. Her eyes gleamed with something between fury and satisfaction. This is more than divorce material, she said. This is criminal conspiracy. Judges eat this alive. Andrew didn't just plan to abandon you, he planned to erase you. These notes prove intent. Your father saved your future. I touched the brass key still in my pocket, feeling its edges press into my palm. Andrew thought he was clever, but he had underestimated two things: the foresight of my father and the stubborn memory of a mother who refused to let truth die with her illness. That night, as I filed the papers into the Storm archive, my phone buzzed. A message from David Brennan, Andrew's business partner. Amanda, I've been reviewing client files. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the fund. He targeted elderly widows, convincing them they had memory issues while draining their accounts. I have recordings. We need to meet. The storm had grown wider. Andrew's cruelty wasn't confined to me. It stretched across families, across states. I stared out at the rain as it began again, whispering against the glass. Andrew thought I was the lesson. But what I held now, the key, the emails, the testimony, was proof that he was just one chapter in a far larger crime. And tomorrow, that story would be read aloud in court. The next morning, the hotel room had transformed into a war room. Papers blanketed the dining table. Bank ledgers, forged property transfers, highlighted emails, and my father's sticky notes, his handwriting standing guard like a warning from the grave. Valentina stood at one end, flipping through spreadsheets, her glasses sliding down her nose, her fingers darting like a conductor commanding an orchestra of evidence. Andrew didn't just hide money, she said, her voice clipped with outrage. He siphoned strategically, from widows, from retirees, people least likely to fight back. This isn't mismanagement. This is predation. Marcus pulled up a call recording David Brennan had emailed overnight. Andrew's voice filled the room, arrogant and gleeful. She thought she was signing a routine authorization. By the time she realized, the money was gone. Old people never remember the details anyway. My stomach nodded. I pictured Mrs. Hartley, the sweet woman who'd once shown me photos of her grandchildren at a gala. Valentina confirmed it with a line of numbers on the screen. 800,000. Gone. Rebecca slammed her pen down. This pushes it into elder abuse territory. Judges hate that. Prosecutors love it. With David corroborating, we can hand this to federal court with a bow on top. At 11 a.m., a knock on the door. Marcus opened it cautiously. Jennifer stood there, holding another envelope, eyes raw from sleeplessness. "There's more," she whispered. "Dad set up a trust, $2 million, in your name alone. Mom was the trustee. Andrew found out through me and's been trying to get at it for months." She placed the envelope on the table like an offering. Inside, paperwork from my father's estate, the trust details, bank statements Andrew had never meant for me to see. Rebecca's eyes lit up. "That account is insulated. Small private bank in Wisconsin. He couldn't touch it without forgery," Jennifer added, voice breaking. "Mom's lawyer caught him trying. If he'd succeeded, you'd have nothing left." I sat back, feeling the brass key in my pocket press against my palm. Between Dad's foresight, Mom's memory, and Jennifer's reluctant confession, the picture sharpened. Andrew hadn't just planned to leave me destitute. He'd plotted to erase me completely, frame me if necessary. Valentina swiveled her laptop toward us. "Look at this." On the screen, a map stretched across 5 states, dotted with red pins. The SEC has been running a 3-year investigation into boutique hedge funds siphoning money from elderly clients. Guess whose name keeps popping up? Andrew's, again and again. My chest went cold. "So last night, leaving me in the rain, it wasn't just cruelty?" Valentina shook her head. "No. He knew the walls were closing in. He wanted you broken, compliant. Someone he could use as a shield or a scapegoat when the FBI came knocking." Rebecca leaned forward, her gaze steady. "But you didn't break. You documented. You prepared. And now you'll be the witness who buries him." By late afternoon, Marcus drove me and Jennifer to the First National Bank on Hennepin, where the brass key found its lock. The manager, an old friend of my father's, greeted us with solemn respect. Inside the vault, I pulled open the box. More documents. More evidence. Forged loan applications. Property transfer deeds with my forged signature. Accounts in my name, drained dry. Each page carried my father's notes. "He will try this. Protect yourself." It was as though Dad had known Andrew's character from the start and left me a map to survive him. Marcus photographed every page, the camera's shutter echoing in the vault. Each click felt like justice breathing closer. Back at the hotel, Rebecca stacked the day's findings into a neat tower. She placed her hand on top like a seal. "This is bigger than divorce, bigger than abandonment. Tomorrow we walk into federal court, and Andrew Mitchell won't just be a failed husband. He'll be the centerpiece of a fraud ring takedown." The rain began again outside, steady, relentless. I touched the brass key in my pocket, grounding myself in its weight. Andrew thought he had left me stranded. In truth, he had set me free. He thought silence would make me weak. Instead, it made my evidence sing louder than thunder. And tomorrow, when the gavel fell, it wouldn't just mark the end of my marriage. It would mark the end of his empire. The federal courthouse loomed like a fortress, its marble steps slick with rain. Reporters clustered at the entrance, their umbrellas forming a forest of black. Rebecca's hand pressed steady against my back as we walked inside. I wore a charcoal gray suit, professional and unyielding, the jade pendant tucked beneath my collar. This was no longer about survival. It was about testimony. Inside, the air buzzed with restrained tension. Andrew sat at the defendant's table, thinner now, his hair overgrown, his once perfect posture sagging. When his eyes met mine, I smiled faintly, the same serene smile I had given him over breakfast countless times. But today it carried the weight of everything he had taken and everything I was about to reclaim. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres, rose. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal and theft. It is about a man who targeted the vulnerable, including his own wife, and drained millions into offshore accounts. It is about cruelty that escalated into criminality." He gestured toward me. "And it begins with one night, when Andrew Mitchell abandoned his wife 37 miles from home in a storm." The jury's eyes flicked toward me. I sat tall, my silence deliberate, my presence louder than words. Over 11 days, the evidence unfurled like a noose. Witness after witness took the stand. Elderly clients testified about how Andrew had convinced them to sign papers they didn't understand, only to watch their life savings vanish. Former employees spoke of cooked books, of being ordered to falsify numbers. Valentina explained the offshore maze. Shell companies, Cayman accounts, Panama transfers. With each spreadsheet projected on the screen, Andrew shrank further in his chair. Then came the recordings. My phone captured his voice. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." The jury shifted uneasily, several jurors exchanging looks of disgust. Next, the garage clip. Andrew pacing, gloating. "Jennifer's been perfect. Every detail about Amanda's mother's estate, worth nearly $2 million, and she doesn't even know it exists." Jennifer testified next, voice trembling but clear. She admitted her debts, her desperation, how Andrew had manipulated her into betraying me. She handed over their emails, each one dripping with his feigned concern. "I thought he was helping us," she confessed, "but he was only helping himself." I watched the jurors' faces harden. Betrayal of family cut deeper than numbers. On day 12, the courtroom doors opened and Nayan walked in. Gone was the designer polish. In its place, a simple dress, her hair pulled back. She had been granted immunity for her testimony, but her words cut Andrew like knives. "He called it three-dimensional chess," she told the jury. "He bragged about targeting widows. He said Amanda was the perfect cover, sweet, trusting, naive. He planned to disappear to Costa Rica once he'd drained enough, and 3 weeks before his arrest, he told me he was leaving me too. He already had another woman waiting there." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Andrew's face twisted, fury and humiliation battling on his features. The final shock came when a young man named Christopher Walsh took the stand. He was 22, sharp-jawed, with Andrew's eyes. "I'm Andrew Mitchell's son," he said, voice steady. "My mother received hush money for 22 years, $1,500 a month, from his client accounts. I have the records. I have his threats in writing." The jury leaned forward, rapt. This wasn't just fraud. This was a lifetime of deception, a web of lies stretching across decades. Against his attorney's advice, Andrew took the stand. For 2 hours, he tried to spin himself as the victim, the misunderstood genius. He claimed I had known about his affairs, that elderly clients had willingly authorized transactions, that the recordings were taken out of context. But under cross-examination, his composure cracked. Shown forged documents, he sputtered excuses. Presented with Nain's recordings, he called them fabrications. When confronted with Christopher's testimony, he sneered, "That was a personal matter." The jury saw through it. Deliberation lasted less than 3 hours. On count 1, wire fraud, guilty. Count 2, wire fraud, guilty. By the time they reached count 15, Andrew's head was in his hands. Guilty. On all charges. I sat between Marcus and Rebecca, my hand resting on the jade pendant beneath my collar. I felt my father's presence, my mother's clarity, my brother's strength. The man who left me in the rain had finally been abandoned by everyone else. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The same courtroom, the same marble columns, but the atmosphere had shifted. The jury was gone, the verdict already sealed. Now it was only the gavel and the reckoning. Judge Coleman's voice was measured, but each word struck like stone. Mr. Mitchell, you targeted the most vulnerable members of society, elderly clients, widows, even your own family. You betrayed trust, fabricated documents, and showed no remorse. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison without the possibility of early release. 8 years. Andrew stood, chains clinking as the bailiffs moved closer. He turned his head just enough to lock eyes with me. His lips shaped the words. This isn't over. I rose to my feet, speaking loud enough for the microphones to catch. You're right. The civil suits start next month. The gavel came down. The bailiffs led him away in shackles. For the first time in 3 years, his back was the one retreating. 6 weeks later, the whistleblower reward cleared. $1.2 million for providing documentation that led to the recovery of stolen funds. Combined with the trust my father had hidden, the assets the court had awarded me, and the donations trickling in from grateful clients, I suddenly had resources I'd never imagined. Resources that demanded purpose. Marcus found the building, a renovated Victorian in Minneapolis's Whittier neighborhood. 3 stories, 8 offices, a conference room large enough for group sessions. Most importantly, multiple exits. Safety, by design. We signed the lease on a Thursday. By Monday, the Phoenix Foundation had its home. The early days were a blur. Marcus installed panic buttons in every office. Valentina built encrypted systems for financial investigations. Rebecca took a leave from her practice to establish our legal aid arm. Our first client arrived within weeks. Maria, a teacher whose husband had hidden their savings and threatened to report her to immigration, despite her being a citizen. Valentina traced the money. Rebecca filed the papers. Marcus arranged safe transportation. I sat with her while she cried, recognizing the hollow look I once saw in my own mirror. You are not crazy, I told her. You are not weak. And you are not alone. Jennifer showed up on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months sober, carrying a box of donuts. She stood in the lobby like a child waiting for permission. I want to help, she said simply. I know what it's like to be manipulated. Maybe I can stop others from making the mistakes I did. We started her on the phones, answering calls. But she had a gift. Her honesty pierced through shame. Within 6 months, she was leading support groups. Her own scars turned into lanterns for others. Even Mom visited one bright afternoon, Marcus driving her carefully through the city. She sat in my office, looking at the framed photos of women we'd helped, smiling with their children, standing in front of new apartments, diplomas in hand.
Your father would be proud, she whispered, her trembling hand brushing a photo of a woman who had escaped with 3 children. He always said the best revenge against cruelty is kindness to others.
1 year after Andrew's sentencing, a letter arrived. Prison stationery, his handwriting precise as ever. 4 pages of venom, blaming me for everything, insisting I had entrapped him, calling me vindictive. The final line read, I hope you learned your lesson. I had it framed and hung on my office wall, next to my degrees. When clients asked, I told them the truth. Yes, I learned my lesson. I learned that when someone shows you who they are through cruelty, believe them. I learned that patience and planning can outlast years of abuse. And I learned that the best way to answer someone who tries to break you is to become unbreakable, and then use that strength to lift others. On the anniversary of the night at the rest stop, I stood in the Phoenix Foundation's lobby. The rain fell again outside, steady and relentless, drumming against the glass like memory. 87 women had found safety through our doors that year. Some needed only legal advice. Others required safe houses and new identities. Each one arrived believing they were trapped. Each one left knowing storms don't destroy stone. They reveal the cracks. Andrew thought he abandoned me in the rain. Instead, he handed me the thunder, and I used it to build shelter. 18 months after that night at the rest stop, the Phoenix Foundation thrived like a living organism. The lobby buzzed with the hum of voices, phones ringing, papers rustling. Walls once bare now carried photos of women and families who had rebuilt their lives, smiles that felt like small revolutions. Valentina ran the forensic wing, mentoring a new team of accountants who volunteered their nights to track hidden assets. Rebecca oversaw a growing team of lawyers, fierce advocates who could dismantle an abuser's defense in a single hearing. Marcus, ever vigilant, managed logistics and security, his sharp eyes always scanning for threats before they arrived. And Jennifer, my sister, once the weak link, had become the heart of our support groups. Women trusted her. She told them the truth about addiction, desperation, and manipulation. She cried with them, laughed with them, and showed them what recovery could look like. Her betrayal had become her redemption. Mom came often on her clearer days. She sat in the sunlit office with tea, her gaze resting on the thank you cards pinned across the wall. Sometimes she repeated the same phrase, as if it were a mantra. Your father would be proud. And every time, I believed it more. But Andrew hadn't disappeared entirely. From prison, he found ways to claw for relevance. Word reached me through old contacts. He had been elected treasurer of the Inmates Investment Club, still pretending to be the genius strategist, still spinning his downfall as someone else's trap. Then came the letter. 4 pages, written in his exacting script, venom dripping from every line. He blamed me for orchestrating everything, insisted I'd entrapped him, called me vindictive, ungrateful, a destroyer of men. The last line, I hope you learned your lesson. I framed it, hung it in my office, right next to my diplomas and certifications. When clients asked, I told them the truth. Yes, I did learn. I learned storms reveal strength. I learned cruelty is its own destruction. I learned that silence, used wisely, can be louder than any scream. Nayan returned too, but not as I expected. She stood in our lobby one afternoon, hair cut short, clothes plain, carrying herself with humility I had never seen. I've been in therapy, she told me, sitting across from my desk. I've been trying to understand why I let myself be manipulated. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can help others avoid the same mistakes. We gave her a chance. She began speaking at colleges, warning young women about men who dangled power and prestige like bait. Her honesty was brutal, her vulnerability disarming. Students listened. Some cried. Others came forward with stories of their own. It didn't erase what she had done, but it created something new from the ashes. That fall, the Phoenix Foundation hosted its first gala. Women stood at the podium, telling their stories, their voices shaking but unbroken. Among them was Mrs. Hartley, the widow Andrew had defrauded of nearly $1 million. She had recovered some of her funds through civil suits, but more importantly, she had found her voice. That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind, she told the crowd. Amanda showed me I was actually finding my strength. The audience rose in a standing ovation, applause rolling like thunder. I stood at the back of the room, tears stinging my eyes. Not from grief. Those tears had long dried, but from something harder to name. Vindication, gratitude, transformation. Andrew thought he left me powerless in a storm. Instead, I had become the storm, and then the shelter. And as the rain drummed softly on the roof that night, I realized This wasn't just my story anymore. It belonged to every woman who had walked through our doors, every survivor who had chosen to rise. 4 months later, I found myself back in the same federal courthouse, but this time, not as a victim. I was there as a witness, a partner in justice. The civil suits against Andrew had begun, 17 of them filed by former clients who had lost their life savings to his schemes. Rebecca walked beside me, her briefcase heavier than usual, brimming with depositions and financial ledgers. "Remember," she whispered as we entered the courtroom, "you're not here to relive trauma. You're here as the woman who exposed him. Let them see that strength." Inside, the atmosphere was different from his criminal trial. Quieter, colder. No jury, just sharp attorneys and clients with eyes full of grief and anger. At the defense table, Andrew sat again, his prison jumpsuit traded for a borrowed suit, though shackles clinked faintly beneath the table. He looked older, thinner, like a shadow of the man who once strutted through boardrooms with champagne confidence. But when his eyes found mine, that old hatred still burned. David Brennan testified first, Andrew's business partner turned whistleblower. His voice was low but steady as he described years of suspicion, the moment he began secretly recording meetings, and the evidence he'd gathered of Andrew's embezzlement. "Mr. Mitchell didn't just betray his clients," Brennan said. "He mocked them, called them easy marks, said elderly women were perfect prey because no one believes them when they forget."
Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Andrew shifted, jaw tightening, but he didn't look up.
Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes. The bailiff swore me in. My palms were dry. I was no longer the trembling woman abandoned in a storm. I told the court about the night he left me at the rest stop, how his cruelty had been the final straw in a pattern of financial abuse and coercive control. I explained the documents my father had hidden, the recordings Marcus had captured, the spreadsheets Valentina had uncovered. And then I looked directly at Andrew. "You thought you could erase me," I said, my voice steady. "But every step you took left a footprint, and I followed them all the way here." He flinched, just slightly, but enough. By afternoon, Nyan was called. Her immunity deal compelled her to speak truthfully. She described luxury trips, gifts bought with stolen funds, and Andrew's plans to vanish to Costa Rica. "He told me Amanda was weak," she admitted, her voice cracking. "He said she would never fight him. But he was wrong. She was the only one who did." The judge's gaze lingered on me as Nain stepped down. The verdict in the civil suits was swift. Andrew was ordered to pay restitution totaling over $30 million. Money he no longer had. Money that would haunt him for the rest of his life. As the gavel fell, Andrew turned in his chair, his voice a hoarse whisper meant only for me. "You destroyed me." I leaned closer, my reply calm, deliberate. "No, Andrew, you destroyed yourself. I just showed the world." That evening, the Phoenix Foundation's offices glowed with warmth. Volunteers bustled, clients sat in quiet circles, and the walls hummed with stories of survival. Jennifer poured tea for a new arrival, her gentle voice coaxing trust. Marcus adjusted the new security system, while Valentina trained interns on tracing digital footprints. I stood in the lobby, looking at the brass key from my father now framed under glass. Beside it hung Andrew's prison letter, "I hope you learned your lesson." And I had. The best revenge wasn't his downfall. It was this: transforming pain into purpose, cruelty into community, abandonment into a shelter that could weather any storm. 1 year later, the Phoenix Foundation hosted its second annual gala. The ballroom glittered with light, but it wasn't the chandeliers that dazzled. It was the faces of women who had survived storms and rebuilt their lives. Tables were filled with clients, donors, volunteers, and families who had once thought safety was impossible. I stood near the stage, watching Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, our oldest client at 78, step to the microphone. She wore a deep green dress, her posture regal despite all she had endured. That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind, she said, her voice strong. Amanda and her team showed me I was actually finding my strength. Today, I have my home back, my savings restored, and my grandchildren's future secured, and I am proud to help fund the emergency shelter program, because no woman should ever feel as lost as I once did. The room erupted in applause. Donors stood, clapping until tears ran down cheeks. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. This was what Andrew had never understood. Power wasn't control. Power was community. Earlier that week, I had received another letter from him. Still handwritten, still venomous, still clinging to the delusion that he was the victim. "You've made your point," he wrote. "But you'll never erase me. People will remember me long after they forget you." I'd almost laughed, because every wall of the Phoenix Foundation was lined with photos, stories, and thank you cards. Women and children who would never forget the shelter that saved them. That was legacy, not the hollow empire of a hedge fund manager rotting in prison. The letter now hung in our lobby, framed next to a plaque engraved with our motto, "From the storm, we rise." Visitors often paused to read both. Survivors smiled when they realized the contrast, his bitterness beside their triumph.
Jennifer took the stage next, leading the room in a toast. Her sobriety chip glimmered in her palm as she spoke. "I betrayed my sister once," she admitted, her voice breaking, "but she forgave me. And together we've built something bigger than either of us. To every woman here tonight, your past mistakes don't define you. Your strength does."
The standing ovation she received was louder than any condemnation she had once feared. After the speeches, I slipped outside. The city was wrapped in rain again, soft drops painting the sidewalk silver. I tilted my face upward, breathing in the storm. 2 years ago, I had stood on cracked asphalt at an abandoned rest stop, shivering as Andrew's car disappeared into the dark. He thought he had abandoned me to weakness. Instead, he had handed me the thunder. Now, I was no longer just Amanda, the woman he tried to erase. I was Amanda Harrison, founder of the Phoenix Foundation, builder of shelters, breaker of chains. Behind me, laughter and applause spilled from the ballroom. Ahead, the night stretched wide, filled with possibilities. Andrew once told me I needed to learn my place. I had, and it was here, in the storm, unbreakable, with hundreds of voices rising beside mine.